What's going on, team? Welcome back along to the channel. Another week has passed us by, and that means only one thing. It is time for the Super Rugby preview show. Round 8 is incoming, and we have a full complement of matches for this roundup. And as always, we've got a special guest joining us on the show. None other than Ryan, the man behind the Tribe Sports app, or the man dealing with the Tribe Sports app. Welcome back along, sir.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
It's good. I've got a lot of tricky ones. I mean, Super Rugby is an absolute mind-boggler at the moment, isn't it? It's an amazing competition. I mean, it's best year probably, I think, in quite a long time. But let's get into the show anyway. We do the usuals. You've been here before. You know how it goes. We do talk about the yellow cards. Now, this is a big favourite segment of mine. Now, yellow cards, I'm not going to ask you the big quiz question of how many we've had this year compared to last year. I will tell you, in fact, we've had 31. It was a poor round for yellow cards in round 7. Of course, red cards did pretty well. They chalked up three from the round, so 4 in total now. Last year, we had 33 yellow cards. So 2018 takes the lead back, but hopefully the referees can get their act into gear and get that number back up for this season's tally. This big stat question I did have for you that I'm going to trial you with, see who looks the cleverest out of this. The only side not to receive a yellow card in Super Rugby this year. And I can give you a hint, if you want a hint.
I do need a hint. I do need a hint.
Okay, I can cut it down quite considerably by saying they haven't got a yellow card, but they have got a red card.
Well, I was just actually thinking, perhaps it's the Blues.
The Blues? Are they? No, it's not the Blues. I can tell you that. It is not the Blues. They've just eliminated one of the 4 sides that have a yellow card.
Well, then it must be. Surely it's the Sharks.
You're close. You're in South Africa, but it's not the Sharks. It's the Bulls.
The Bulls.
The Bulls have not. The Sharks are actually the worst. They are first equal with 3 other sides on 4 yellow cards.
Haven't seen enough
but the
of their
Blues
games.
I think the Blues have only had 1 or 2, so yes. The second half of games. So there we go. There's the brain teaser for this week's edition of the competition. Yeah, interesting stat. I thought that was really weird, the amount of cards we've had. The Bulls, bar that red card, pretty good discipline. You've got to give them that as well. Before we get into the games, though, we'll have a look at SuperBru. Now, here we go, SuperBru. This is going to be interesting. We'll talk about your picks in a second. But first, we've got to give the shout-out to good old Nate's at the top. He's given it to me on Twitter. Fair enough. Fair play, Nate's. Well done. But guess what, son? You don't have the yellow cap on your head right now, do you? Jack's doing well. He's dropped down as a second, sadly, for old Jack. And Grant has actually made the big plunge up into the top 3. I'm still happy, though. I'm still happy. I'm in the mid-teens, 17th, so I'm really happy with how my picks are going. You're shaking your head. You don't want to talk about yours. We'll give Paul a bit of a shout-out. He moved up a mighty 2 spots over the week. And Brett, well, Brett, I mean, we need to get Brett back on the show because he's dropped 10. 10, that's a huge drop. Paul's actually passed him. How far down are we going here, right? Goodness me.
I am climbing, but I started the season horrifically. So the only way was up, and I'm happy to be climbing.
That's true. You're up 9 spots to like inside the top 60. We'll put it nicely like that. 58th spot. I mean, yep, you're right. Still, the only way is up there. But, I mean, there's still a few people below you as well. So it can't be all that bad. But there we go, SuperBru. Well played. Nate's up at the top spot. We'll see how quickly you fall down from there. Let's get into the matches. Of course, we have a full round of games to go through. And we all kick things off with the Highlanders and the Hurricanes in Friday night's action. Now, this is an interesting game, isn't it? Very interesting, especially for the Highlanders. A real tough spot for them. I thought, yeah, the penalty loss to the Hurricanes outside of the regulation time and extra time, if you would call it. And then they had the abandoned match, which I know very, very poor of what happened about that, but still from a team perspective for the Highlanders about the rugby, that wasn't the best timing for them. Then, of course, what you'll be most pleased about, the loss to the Blues. Then they had the bye. It's been a torrid time for the Highlanders, and now they're back. No Naholo, he's gone. Is this the ultimate test of this never die attitude that the Highlanders have built themselves on? Now they've got to really, really stick it up.
Yeah, and I think no Naholo, no Aaron Smith is going to be. That's 2 class All Blacks taken out of the side. Hard to build momentum, I think, as a team when you had the bye as well as the cancelled game. Some might say that the cancelled game was 2 points gained, so
That's true.
in a competition kind of standpoint, maybe that helped them. But in terms of building momentum into the season, particularly for a team that surprisingly, in my opinion, has chopped and changed quite a lot and used a lot of rotation, and maybe almost have been, it's almost been detrimental to them that they've had so much depth. Aaron Major trying to get as many guys kind of involved, and not really settling on a first string 15. So I wonder if that's going to kind of happen at some point, or if they're going to keep rotating. But this is a must-win for them.
Yeah, it's a huge game for them. Rob Thompson is back on the bench as well, which I think is huge. Inclusion back for the Highlanders. He's a big part of their backline play. But the big question about the Highlanders is number 10 for them. I think, it's like you talked about, big or good depth. Exciting depth, I guess you call it. But who do you think has really made the biggest stand-up? If you're picking the team for a grand final tomorrow, Josh Ioane your starting team?
I think so. I think you know what you're going to get with Marty Banks. He's going to kick his goals. He's going to direct the team around the park adequately. But I just don't think he kind of brings that same running dimension that Ioane does. Ioane's obviously a little bit more inexperienced. So perhaps in these big derby games, there's a question of you put Banks in there, you know what you're going to get, and just kind of having that solid presence there. Whereas maybe they'll use Ioane a bit more against some of the overseas sides who perhaps are treated a little bit differently in terms of the quality of opponent.
Yep, it's a crunch match. It is for both these sides as well. The Hurricanes. Geordie Barrett, do you spare a thought for the guy? Another new position, this time outside centre with the injuries, of myriads of injuries they've got there. Arso now the one that's seemingly out for the season. Preferred position for the guy, but God, you got to feel sorry that he can't just settle down in a spot and try and make it his own in the team.
I was wondering if he's trying to collect the whole set. So
jersey collection.
I think he's only got 9 and 10 left. Maybe left wing. I don't know if he started on the left wing, but definitely wing, fullback, in both midfield spots. And yes, I mean sometimes being a utility player can be a curse, because you do just get shuffled around. Whereas if you're locked into one spot, you just get left there. I think the Hurricanes use them as they see fit, and as they need. But I think in terms of higher honours, it's hard to know just exactly where the All Black selectors see him as a first choice player, or at least where they see his best position. I'm not convinced myself. I don't think he's a fullback. I think he probably could be a useful winger. But he seems to think he's a midfielder. So, yeah, who knows?
It's interesting you say about higher honours as well, because for him to, I guess, he was always going to be a considered name, but for him to actually push a case, for a starting spot, World Cup, he's got to play, obviously, in a position. But when you're playing out of position, it's very easy to not play at your best. If you're playing at 85% on the wing, you're not going to really strike fear into the All Blacks coaches saying, oh yes, you need him come the World Cup. Yeah, so it's a bit of a 50-50 for him. The rest of the Hurricanes side, it's pretty settled. They're still missing Coles, but I mean they dealt with that every single match for the last 10 years almost, it seems like. But they haven't beaten the Highlanders, at Forsyth Bar since 2015. Do you think this is going to be the year they'll get the job done again?
No, I'm going with the Highlanders. Ooh. I think they're going to sneak home.
Oh, that's interesting. What's your margin?
3.
Oh, that's a great start to the episode. I love it. Brilliant stuff. Because I've gone the Hurricanes by 2. This is a tough one. It is a tough one. The opening couple of games are tough ones, and it's a 50-50. I just don't know when you look at that Highlanders team and the form, I guess you could call it, or the history they've had going into it. It's really tough. And I look at also what the Hurricanes did against Crusaders and how smashed they got, and then that tips me towards your side of things and say, are they good enough to really step up to that level like the Crusaders are on? But yeah, tough one, and I would fully believe, I wouldn't be surprised if you got the points on that one either, but it's going to be a really, really interesting game to kick off round 8 of the competition. Let's move on to our second game it's probably, I think, the second toughest one to pick up. It would be the Reds versus the Stormers. The Reds are becoming hard to pick. Really, really tough. They're not getting enough ball. I think the teams have worked out that if they starve them a possession, they don't really they're not good enough side to really pick it up from not many opportunities or not much chance with the ball in hand. They need a team that can control the game a bit more for them. How are they going to fix this up against a team like the Stormers who, well, we don't know what they're going to offer, but the Reds, they need to work on their own game. And where do they find that?
Well, I think really the key for them is converting their opportunities. And I think they've had a number of games where they've actually probably edged the game on, across the park. They just haven't turned those opportunities into points. They don't seem to, sort of know what their best backline is in terms of shuffling at 10. Bit of a shuffle this week in midfield with Novalu joining Karevi. Jack Hardy comes onto the wing. So there's, they keep tinkering with their backline. The pack as a whole seems pretty settled, and I think it's doing a reasonable job in terms of getting them those chances, but they just don't take them. So that's kind of the key. I think they have to turn pressure into points.
And their backline struggles too, doesn't it? Like Karevi really does smash everything. He's their star. He's the only guy they can really rely on. The rest of the team, I think, does struggle. I think the number 10 jumper, although they got some interesting or some promising young 10s there, I just think they lack that direction. And I think they get it through the midfield there, but it's just not enough in terms of playmaking to really spark something for them, which is a shame. But I do like their pack, and I do think they're going to have a decent enough year, better than what we've had from them the last couple of years. But they're up against the Stormers, and I think the Stormers have been a bit of a highlight of South African touring teams so far. Yeah, they haven't had the great results, but I mean, they've come and they've played some exciting rugby. They've really given a lot more effort, I think, than we've seen in previous years. But the big question is, how are they going to play? They played very forward-dominated. They copped a lot of criticism for it as well. Maybe a bit of pressure on that they changed their style up big time last round and went with a dominant open play sort of style. Where are they going to go to now against the Reds? They're going to try and match them up front, which is probably the Reds' strength, or look to win it, like you say, in their weakness or their disjointedness of their backline?
I think against the Reds, you have to match them up front. And I think, perhaps when you look at their tactics against the Blues, maybe they saw that game as being a little bit more open. Blues probably don't have the strongest pack on paper, particularly with their starters. So I think maybe they saw that as an opportunity to play a little bit more expansive, kind of match fire with fire in terms of how the Blues were going to play. Their problem's a little bit the same, though. They just can't score tries. And a decent team, I think, against the Blues last week would have turned a lot of those chances into points. And in the end, for a game that was pretty even across the park, the Blues won with a bonus point, and it was simply because the Stormers just couldn't score tries. So I think that's this is a game between two teams that really struggle to turn their chances into points, and that's why I think it's hard to pick.
Yeah, just talking about points and with the Stormers, their points differential, they've got 110 points for and 134 against. And you just look in the South African Conference, most of the teams are up around, there's a couple 140, the Jaguares 140, 150s. And even defensively, they're not really that strong either, sitting around the middle. So really struggling in that area. The Reds, a bit better off though, scoring a bit more points, but overall points differential between those two sides is very, very similar. The thing I think is going to be the weakness for the Stormers is the key players they're missing, especially in their pack. They're missing a few key guys like of Ed Sabeth and that. That's going to be key for me. And I've got a sneaking little edging towards the Reds on this one. I
have too.
Oh.
I think, I just think at the end, the Stormers just don't score enough points. And I think against the Reds, that's kind of what the Reds are looking for. The opportunity to probably sneak a game that probably has low scoring written over it. I can't see this being, a high scoring encounter. So I think two forward packs that are probably going to kind of smash each other up front and see which kind of team prevails in the end. And I think the home side gets up.
What's the margin?
Reds by 7.
Oh, so 7. That's not sneaking by. That's a big margin. I've only got the Reds by 2. Just by 2. Quickly, before we move on, though, what's your thoughts on the Stormers, how they're played? Are you a fan of them trying to adopt this more open style of play? It's something that South African teams have tried before and ultimately struggled to really convert into properly. But do you think they're on something saying they should persist with, or try to go back to what they know?
I think the interesting thing is they've probably got players there that actually can carry it out. The likes of Damien Willems, Dylan Lades, Damien Dialendi, they're sides that players that can play with some flair. They maybe don't have the kind of ball-carrying, ball-playing forwards that are required, but yeah, I think some of the comments about the way they played last week were interesting in that they, felt that they needed to have a mixture of more than one way to skin a cat kind of thing, and they gave it a go, and it just, in the end of the day, it just didn't come off. They made enough half chances, they just couldn't finish them.
It was an exciting game. I quite enjoyed that game, apart from the fact that the Blues won, but, you give and take the good with the bad.
That was the best part.
That's a bit, I think you're going to say that. It was an exciting match. I mean, it's pretty close most of the way through. Only going to take that one little thing of saying that Stormers could have broken that game apart, but like you say, they couldn't. They just couldn't finish that touch off. So there we go. The Blues, we'll talk about them in a minute. We're moving over to South Africa. The Lions are up against the Sharks. Now, South African matches. They're just a nightmare at the moment. The Lions, of course, we didn't see last round on the bye. And, I mean, their recent form has been a bit average. They've only really stuck matches. They've looked like they've got quite a few holes or quite a few deficiencies they need to fix up. And after this match, they are on tour as well, which is going to be big for them. Have they got it in them to sort this out before they actually leave and go on these big touring matches, which obviously, as we all know, South African teams don't like?
Yeah, I made the comment before that I probably haven't seen the Sharks play a lot this season, but the Lions I have watched a lot of, and they're just sloppy. I mean, they've got so much talent across that team. They just don't play with any accuracy. I mean, the game against the Rebels, how they won that, I'll never know. They just real, sloppy handling, trying to push offloads, trying to play this kind of razzle-dazzle game, which has generally worked for them in the past. Not a great line out that could be a problem against the Sharks. They're the kind of team that if it all clicks and if it all comes together, are going to blow someone away. But at the moment, we're just not seeing it. They're patchy. They can't string 80 minutes together. I think this game's a real tricky one for them because the Sharks are the opposite to that. They'll just do Sharks things and probably grind this out.
Interesting about their lineup, though. They've got Brink back from a very pretty long-term injury as well, which is good to see him returning to the field. But they've got Deante in centre. I found that a bit odd. A great player, explosive player, exciting player. We hardly ever seen him in that sort of position, but how do you think he's going to convert there for the Lions?
He did make a bit of an impact coming on against the Sunwolves a couple of weeks ago, running off Lionel Mapu. So perhaps they saw that and think that he can fit in there. They've probably got almost too many outside backs, and they're trying to fit them in with the likes of Skosan and Mahuza and Kurtzer and Combrink. So at the point you get to the point where it's like, well, how do you get them all game time? So shifting him into the midfield, it'll be interesting to see how it goes.
It's a go back to the Geordie Barrett situation, isn't it?
A little
Guy
bit,
playing out of position versus, it's the old rugby adage story, isn't it? But they're up against Sharks, and the last time they met here at home, it was for the Sharks. Sharks actually won, so the last meeting between these two sides puts a little bit extra on it, but what we've seen from the Sharks is that the travel is going to go against them, but more so their form against other South African teams. They have been dreadful. What is it about the side that they just can't seem to stick it up against these other South African sides? In the big games, the derby games, the ones you really want to win, they've struggled with.
If I knew that secret, I probably would have shared it with the Blues a couple of years ago. But yeah, you're right. I mean, and that makes it a challenge. And if they're going to stick in the race for the African Conference, and it's still pretty close run thing. They probably do need to start picking up some wins. And if they win this one, they go to the top of the conference with games still to come. So it's a big challenge for them. Johannesburg never easy for anyone either. So
A tough place. You're right about the conference. It's incredibly tight. The Lions are at the top on 18, Bulls on 17, 16 for the Sharks, 14 for the Stormers, who's still not out, but I mean, at least they've got their tour pretty much almost out of the way. A couple of weeks and they'll be back home. So there's a crunch match. Every match is big like this, and I mean, to see the Sharks could go top of an upset over the top side would be interesting, but I'm not going that way. How about yourself?
Yeah, upset alert.
Oh, here we go.
Sharks by 3.
Sharks by 3. Oh, this is good. This is good. I'm going Lions. I'm going the home safety, their own fluffy pillows of the Lions. They've been at home a couple of weeks. Yeah, they'll be well rested, executing everything perfectly, pinpoint from all the strategic planning. They'll take it by 4. That's my pick. nice close one to move on with. Right, back to New Zealand we come. The Crusaders are up against the Brumbies. And what more can you say about this Crusaders team after last week? Business as usual. They've just trudged on. They've had their little patch, I mean, with everything that went on there. But now they're back to the usuals. They got the All Black props back. SuperBru gets a start, which I'm sure you're probably a bit of a fan of. And it's just a strong-looking side from the Crusaders. Take those 2 weeks out, and you probably wouldn't even notice anything's happened.
Yeah, interesting too. 7 changes from last week. And I guess there's going to be a little bit of emotion there. First game back in Christchurch, since the tragedy. So, that can go kind of either way, I think, at times. But I think the Crusaders in general kind of thrive on that sort of situation. What I did find interesting about the changes is that it probably, I guess, targets the fact that the Brumbies are going to be strong up front, and that's where their danger is. So they, bring the All Black props back. Sure, they rest Sam Whitelock, but in terms of the pack, it's generally a pretty full strength. Apart from Whitelock, maybe Ethan Blackadder gets his first start, but it's a quality pack, and then a little bit more rotation in the back line. Hard to see this going any other way, though, isn't it?
It's pretty tough. I mean, yeah, we didn't give Brumbies last week, did we? But I mean, a trip to New Zealand is about the last place an Australian team ever really wants to go, especially against the Crusaders. It's a terrible place for them to be. But interesting, though, on their team that they've named, Pete Samu getting a start. Haven't seen too many starts from him in a Brumbies shirt since he's gone over there. And good to see Pulu back as well. Pretty bad injury in round 1, I'm pretty sure it was. He picked that up. You're expecting big things from him. And Samu to that matter. I think he does make a good impact when he does come off the bench with him.
Yeah, I guess Samu too, coming back to his old team, probably
true.
A little bit there to play for and a little bit of a, I guess, message to send to some of his old mates. I think Pulu was quite a big signing for them, and I think they saw him as bringing a little bit of X factor to their back line, so it is good to see him back. They don't have a lot of firepower in the back, so he's going to add a little bit of X factor to them. Question is whether he's going to get any ball, other than probably returning deep kicks, I'd suggest. The Brumbies, if they are going to challenge this game, they've got to really dominate up front. And they do have a pack that's been pretty strong for the most part. But, yeah, not for me.
Can't see it. How big's your margin going to be?
Crusaders by 19.
19? Oh, he's going large. I'll go a bit more conservative. I've gone by 10 to the Crusaders. Anything could happen. Could be a thrashing of them. The way the Brumbies have been going. I mean, they're only shining like the Brumbies have really been that Chiefs match, hasn't it? And other than that, she's been pretty all downhill for the poor old Brumbies. But, big win there for the Crusaders.
I think that's an interesting point, too, is that at the time you kind of looked at that and went, hey, this is an impressive win. And then you kind of looked at the Chiefs' form after and you went, actually, maybe this doesn't mean anything at all, So Brumbies have been pretty disappointing for mine, probably the last 2 years. I think on paper they should be a better side, and they just haven't put it together.
It's like what you speak of, though. They've got some decent outside backs. Tom Banks is a pretty exciting player. We all know what Henry Spate can do. He's a pretty destructive guy. And, of course, with Pulu out there, you look at those back three and you go, yeah, that could do a bit of damage if they get a bit of space. But are they going to get past Kirandrani, who's normally a guy who's just going to tuck it under and go soldiering straight through? So, yeah, those guys need to get some ball. They need to get some set-piece ball as well and just not do the old one-out barge on through like we used to Kurandrani doing. But we'll see what they do. Yeah, poor old Chiefs. A shame they're not playing because they're always interesting to talk about, especially with how they've been going in the last couple of weeks. Is just mind-boggling stuff. But we'll move on to the Blues. Your Blues are in action.
The form team of the competition.
I was waiting for that. They're up against the Waratahs, a team that I don't mind who they're playing against as long as they're losing to them. It is the Blues. You talked about it a little there. Unthinkable of what's happening here at the Blues. 4 on the trot is a possibility. Like you say, the form team. What's changed for the Blues? Where did this come from? He's speechless.
Who knows? What I will say I was impressed with last week is that I think that's a game in the past they would have lost. So I think a couple of wins have just given them a little bit of confidence. They finally got that monkey off the back with the Derby win. And then last week in a game that they really didn't dominate at any time. You know, they had patches where they were good, but they had patches where they were under the pump from the Stormers. But they were desperate. There was a lot of energy on defence. They scrambled well, and they took their chances. They scored a couple of great tries, and even with the red card at the end, you know, that was a game that last year, 2 years ago, they're losing that game. You know, up by 9 or whatever it was when the red card happened. So great win.
Great win. That's about all you can sum it up with. Tom Robinson. Probably the bolter of the season. Right? He's really been outstanding in that Blues pack.
Huge find. And when you look at it, I mean, like last year, Dalton Papali'i coming out of the Mitre 10 Cup was the big, you know, All Black bolter at the end of year tour. And the way that Robinson and Blake Gibson have been playing on the flanks just means that he can't get in the team and in the starting side anyway. Just a guy that I think the kind of guy the Blues needed, you know, big, raw, heap of energy, heaps of physicality, gets around the park. They just haven't had that kind of dynamic forward, I don't think. Probably, I feel like, you know, there's the last couple of years, I saw Jerome Kaino, but he just was probably getting to the end of his career. And now that they've got this young, sort of youthful, energetic, you know, guy who's just fires them up and just brings something different to the pack with his carries, his defensive work. He's a great line-out option. Huge find.
Massive find for them. They're up against the Waratahs, though. We have to talk about them, unfortunately, just a little bit. But, I mean, how does this side deal with this? They go from the jubilation of toppling the back-to-back champions and what they're claiming to be, you know, their greatest moment, full of blue wall and all this sort of garbage, and they lose to the Sunwolves. I mean, let's not take anything away from the Sunwolves here on this situation, but that is pretty much peaking and then smashing straight back to rock bottom. How does a team go from such extraordinary lengths in the space of a week?
I think, you know, when I reflect on the Crusaders game, is that the Waratahs probably didn't win that game so much as the Crusaders lost it. And I think the Waratahs did a good job of putting pressure on the Crusaders and forcing errors, playing at the right end of the park in wet conditions. But there were still a number of opportunities that the Crusaders, on another day, you know, counter-attack opportunities where they lost the ball. Those kind of half opportunities that normally the Crusaders punish you with, and they didn't. And it just fed into what the Waratahs were doing. They were able to play from in front. They actually played pretty well from in front and being able to control the area of the park they played in. And then that just didn't happen last week. You know, they just couldn't get control of the game in the same way. And really, it kind of sums them up in some regard, in that, you know, they're the team that probably should win the Australian Conference, and they should be controlling it, but they just don't seem to string any sort of form together.
We talked about in the last preview last week about how if that Crusaders-Waratahs game was 2 weeks earlier or 2 weeks later, it probably would have been a 50-point scoreline because, like you said, the Waratahs were terrible. The Crusaders were just equally as bad, if not a little bit worse. It was very, very unlike Crusaders from one side we've already spoken about. But yeah, I mean, to be fair, you'd probably say they almost played better against Sunwolves than they did against the Crusaders, and yet they come away with the result in the game they played worse against. But they're missing a couple of key players. They've got no Hooper and no Beale for this match. It's going to be a big loss for them. But I'm jumping on the bandwagon, I've got to say. I'm hitching in, and I'm going for a Blues win. And I will be massively disappointed if you're not going to say the same by at least a double-digit margin.
Yep. Give me the Blues by a dozen.
A dozen. I'm going the Blues just by 2, though. Just a little bit of a difference, though. So just 2 for me for the Blues, thanks. We'll move on. Over to Australia.
The Blues do have a pretty good record against the Waratahs too, which is a little bit surprising. So I've sort of factored that in as well.
Went straight for the heart. It's like, Blues versus... Blues by 12. Moving on to the Rebels and the Sunwolves. The good old Sunwolves, they're back and they are away to the Rebels. But the Rebels, I mean, they're set pretty well here, aren't they, in Australia? They've had good derby wins as well. They look like a good side. I think a side that's got too many old heads in key positions mainly. But it's a settled team. We've talked a lot about through these matches or through these teams about how there's a lot of chopping and changing, a lot of movement in the starting side. I think the same team's a bit too settled, a bit too experienced in the important areas to slip on the banana skin that is the Sunwolves this season.
Yeah, I think it's only one change at prop, at tight head. So you're absolutely right. The form of Will Genia and Quade Cooper in the halves has just been something else. And probably when you kind of think about what Cooper's been through the last sort of 2 or 3 seasons, something I don't think anyone really saw coming. Genia runs that side. Cooper's playing well outside him. And then they've got some dangerous backs further out that kind of capitalise on that. It's been really impressive the way they've not only started the season well, but the way they've continued that form, bounced back from a couple of tough losses in South Africa. You know, they should have beaten the Lions. They had a chance to beat the Sharks, but a couple of second half capitulations. But hey, they come home and they just straight back into it. And you'd expect them with that sort of form line to roll the Sunwolves. I think this is probably the easiest game to pick of the weekend.
Oh, that's interesting. The Sunwolves are hot. The Sunwolves are the hot team, though, apart from probably the Blues. Okay, I'll give you that one since you're on. The Blues may be the hottest, but the Sunwolves are good, and they look good, and they are tough to beat because they're a side that will keep on doing what they do. If you're beating them by 50, they'll keep on playing that the style. They keep on playing their plan, and they just never seem to go away. And they are causing a bit of trouble. I mean, on the table, they're right there on the equal points of the Reds. They're 1 point away from the Brumbies. They are knocking on the door. And a strong side that they've picked as well, getting those Japanese players back in. But it's got to be tough to pick against them, isn't it?
Well, they're not a team that really strings wins together either. So you can look at last week and go, well, they played well, but they're not really a team in their form line that backs up wins together. Only 2 wins this season, when one of those was against the Chiefs, who we've already talked about. So yeah, I think the Japanese players coming back has probably given them a little bit more steel throughout their side, but they're still a team that I think if things click for them, they are a dangerous side, but I don't think the Rebels will give them the chance.
Experience, though, it talked about at the start. Experience, old heads. They'll just change. They'll adapt, I guess, is probably the key word that you'll make about them. Bigger thing about Sunwolves I'm quite keen to see is the combination at 10 and 12. Hayden Parker at 10, and they've got Tarikawa at 12, which is a similar sort of, I guess, Japanese version of Hayden Parker, quite a playmaking sort of player. So I'm quite keen to see how those two are going to go together. And compared to what we talked about before about outside backs, the Brumbies not getting the ball, the Sunwolves are the opposite of that, aren't they? They're going to give those guys the ball. They're going to give those guys the chances. And if the Rebels aren't awake, if they have another second half capitulation, the Sunwolves are going to take those chances. And it could be a banana skin, but I'm not going to be willing to put my SuperBru points on the line for this one. So I'm still going for home win to the Rebels. How about yourself?
Yeah, I'm going with the Rebels. I have a sneaky feeling my margin's a little bit higher than yours.
Go for it. What is it?
I've got them by 15.
15. I'm not too far away, to be honest with you. I've got the Rebels by 8. So only a try difference between us. But yeah, Rebels should get the job done. I'm expecting some experienced heads to do the job there for them on that one. Right, final game of the round. It's the Bulls versus the Jaguares. And I'll be honest, I've changed my pick in this one in the last hour. So there you go. There's a heads up for the end of the show. Let's talk about the Bulls, okay? We got no Pollard, no Creel, Speckman, probably not to a same degree as those first two, but a big pile of changes, 7 if I'm not mistaken in the team. What's going on there? Is this a case of just simple rotation, or are they probably getting a bit complacent? You could probably maybe call it against the Jaguares.
I haven't actually seen a report on the reason for the changes, but I wonder if it's a Springbok mandated rest policy, because they have been one of the teams that's been the most settled in terms of their selection. So a lot of those guys have played a lot of minutes, particularly Pollard and Creel. So I think it's probably just a case of, hey, need to give these guys a rest. It severely weakens them. Pollard he's got his mitts all over that team and the way they play. They play old-fashioned 10-man rugby a lot of the time, kick their points, play the right end of the park, and just sort of grind teams down. They were happy enough getting in the fight last week, both literal and otherwise. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they go without Pollard. It's a big test for Mani Lebok at 10, who's been on the bench a lot, but they just don't even bring him on. They just say, hey, Andre, go and play 80 minutes for the most part, and Mani's on the bench if we need him. But his chance this week, I guess, to kind of stamp his mark on the team and show that he's capable.
Yeah, that's what it's all about, is an opportunity. And, I mean, there's a lot of new names. You look through, if you're not a big South African rugby follower, you can look through that side and say, goodness me, where have all these guys come from? And from a normal backline, you've probably got 2 or 3 guys who would normally start. I think Sage has played a little bit for them, Ordendale, of course, as well, and Rousseau at fullback. But that's just about a whole new look backline for the Bulls. So, interesting. I had them down here as a point to say that they're a chance, a threat to dethrone the Lions as, the premier South African team. But question marks about it, whatever the reasons are. But Pollard, I think, more than anyone, is a massive, massive omission from the side. Like you say, he controls the game so very, very well. But their opponents getting a bit desperate, though, when you look at the table for them as well. They sit 4 points adrift of the Stormers, and their season's hanging on the thread. If they don't pick up wins now, this could be season gone for them, especially in conference clashes like this, in the big derby games. They need to pick up a W.
And they did beat these guys. They did beat the Bulls in Buenos Aires, so there's a little bit of confidence there. But the Jaguares away from home, I think, even against a weakened Bulls side, there's going to be a challenge. No team named yet, so it's kind of hard to see what they're going to come out with. But you're right, it is a must-win, I think, for them. And if they did win, they're sort of right back in the thick of things again, depending on how results go. But if you do lose, Bulls' chance to possibly be top of the table and well clear of the Jaguares.
Yeah, it would ultimately, the Stormers unlikely going by our picks to pick up a win, so they could keep their margin. But like you say, if they pick up a 4 or 5 point win, 5 is unlikely, but 4, they'll go to 14 as well. And like I say, they're right back in it. The Sharks trip up. It's back to a close conference. It's back to one win completely changing the whole outlook of that conference. So big game for the Jaguares, and I've seen that team. And as you probably guessed, I've mentioned it 3 times, the lack of a player like Pollard in that side is going to dictate my away victory.
Good call.
About you. It is.
I think I was always going to go with the Bulls, and seeing their team, I just brought the margin down. So I've just got them by 7. I think their pack, it will probably still do what it does and kind of grind this one out. Probably not a high-scoring game. If the Jaguares can get enough hands of enough ball, then they're a chance, and this could be a banana skin game. But Loftus is hard to go to, and I think the Bulls get up.
It's going to be an interesting one to finish off the weekend with. Yeah, I'm going by 3 for the Jaguares. I had the Bulls. Yeah, I had the same. I was a big win for the Bulls. I had them double digits to cream it. So, yep, complete turnaround for me. But I mean, this is, let's say, discover new players, isn't it? I mean, they've got to do it. The Bulls have to do it sooner or later. You can't discover the same 15, especially. And like 10, these guys have to get experience, and hey, whatever reason it is, we'll find out just how good these guys are, and one of us is going to suffer when it comes to the final standings of the day. But there we go. That is our full round of round 8 Super Rugby this weekend coming right up. Of course, make sure you get your picks in as well. Let us know what you think about our picks, and if you think we're completely wrong about something, let us know, especially the Blues. But that's us anyway. Thanks for joining me, Ryan. Your Twitter handle is going to be on screen as it always is under your face there, but if anyone wants to have a chat, any promo, poking, any you want to do, go for it.
Just make sure you download Tribe Sports app. So it's free. It's in the App Store. It's in the Play Store. You can keep up with all the rugby. We've got live text commentary of all the Super Rugby games this weekend and always. But there's plenty of other rugby action on there. Hong Kong Sevens are on this week. You got your Major League Rugby. You got all your European stuff. And then a whole bunch of other sports too, if that tickles your fancy.
A little bit of everything. I use it myself. I use it all the time. I was using it for the lineups as I was doing this before we even started anyway. Because it's the first place it gets the lineups. We'll be completely honest. It's on the spot all the time. You line up as soon as they're announced, bang, they're there. You can see them and see there's no Pollard for the Bulls, so you can quickly change your pick and go for the Jaguares to win it instead. But that is us done. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been a great little preview for the weekend, and we'll see you all next time for round 9. Until then, thanks for watching, and take care.